The storm rolled in slowly, like a ghost Eleanor Klein had been waiting for. Thunder cracked over Charleston's Willow Heights nursing home just past 3 a.m., startling the night nurse, though not the woman in room 212. Eleanor had already slipped into silence, her hands folded neatly across a crocheted lavender blanket. The photo of her 3 children sat on the nightstand, faded from sun, but the smiles frozen in time. Marta Franco, Eleanor's full-time caregiver, stood at the window. Her reflection in the glass shimmered with the lightning. Her dark curls were piled loosely atop her head, and her eyes, usually sharp, had gone distant. She had felt it coming for days. Eleanor hadn't spoken in nearly 72 hours. Not since she whispered, "Rain's coming," as if it were something she could summon. Marta had stayed the night in the reclining chair, dozing between sponge baths and gentle hymns hummed into the dark. She'd been with many patients during their final hours. But Eleanor had made her feel something. Guilt, perhaps. Or maybe the kind of love that sneaks up on you, uninvited and impossible to ignore. She picked up the cordless phone and dialed a number from memory. It rang once, twice. On the 3rd ring, someone picked up. "It's me," Marta said, voice low. "She's gone." There was a pause. The other voice, gravelly and slow, replied, "Did she say anything at the end?" "No," Marta said. "Not a word." The call ended without goodbye. Marta stood still for a moment, staring down at Eleanor's face, peaceful, almost expectant. Then she pulled the envelope from Eleanor's nightstand drawer, just beneath a worn Bible, and set it gently on her chest. The words written in blue ink, all caps, read, "To my children." The funeral was held 3 days later at St. Margaret's Chapel, a small, ivy-cloaked sanctuary tucked between downtown Charleston and the harbor. Rain lingered in the air, but the skies had cleared. The weather, like everything else in the Klein family, had no interest in consistency. Rachel arrived first. Dressed in a modest navy dress and clutching a crumpled tissue, she stood outside the church doors, hesitating. It had been 12 years since she'd last seen her mother. Her daughter Ivy, now 16, had stayed home in Charlotte. Rachel couldn't imagine dragging her into this. The last time Eleanor had seen Ivy, she was 3. She doubted her mother would have recognized her now, even if she'd wanted to. Next came Daniel. Sharp suit, stiff posture, and Bluetooth earpiece still in one ear. He looked more like he was on his way to a board meeting than his mother's funeral. He barely nodded at Rachel before stepping inside, muttering something about needing to take a quick call. Rachel didn't ask who. She already knew, probably one of his many clients from Manhattan who didn't know, or didn't care, that Daniel's mother had just died. Jonah showed up last. Not in a car, but on foot, carrying a guitar case and wearing a wrinkled flannel shirt under a thrift store blazer. He smelled like cigarettes and something earthy, almost sweet. His hair was longer than either sibling remembered, streaked with gray, and his boots clapped against the wet pavement with a confidence that didn't match his hollow eyes. "Late as ever," Daniel muttered under his breath when Jonah walked through the church doors. "Still the asshole, I see," Jonah replied, sliding into the pew without looking at either sibling. Rachel sat between them, like old times, shoulders tense. The chapel was mostly empty, just a few elderly residents from Willow Heights, some quiet neighbors from Eleanor's block, and the priest, Father Mallory, who had known the Klein family for over 2 decades. He stepped to the pulpit, cleared his throat, and looked out over the somber gathering. Eleanor Klein was a woman of grace, loyalty, and deep, enduring love, he began. But she also suffered. He paused there, too long. Suffered from more than illness, he said, eyes resting briefly on the children seated in the front row. She carried wounds that medicine couldn't heal. Wounds only love can. Jonah's jaw tensed. Daniel shifted in his seat. Rachel's hands clenched into fists in her lap. Father Mallory continued his eulogy, speaking of Eleanor's devotion to her garden, her favorite books, her unshakable belief in second chances. But none of it could pierce the wall of silence around the Klein siblings. After the service, they stood outside beneath the heavy clouds, unsure what to say or how to say it. "She looks peaceful," Rachel offered. She would have wanted more people, Daniel said, pulling out a flask from inside his coat. She liked being seen. Jonah lit a cigarette. She would have wanted us to stop pretending. The tension snapped when Marta appeared, walking slowly down the church steps with the envelope in hand. Your mother asked me to read this, she said quietly, her voice steady despite the tremble in her fingers. At the funeral. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Why didn't you do it in the funeral? She said it should be after, Marta replied, when the room was smaller. They stood in a tight triangle now, Marta in the center. She opened the envelope carefully and pulled out the single sheet of paper. To my children. If you're hearing this, then I'm gone. But I've waited so long to say what I should have said before we lost each other. Marta's voice grew gentle, slow. She read Eleanor's words exactly as they were written, no more, no less. You were my life's greatest joy. And yet, we drifted. I'm not angry. I don't blame you. I know the world pulls us in many directions, and sometimes the spaces we leave behind feel easier to ignore. I just want you to know, I forgave you a long time ago. Not because you asked me to. Because that's what love does. It forgives. And I loved you with everything I had, even when I was alone. Rachel wept silently. Jonah closed his eyes. Daniel stood like a statue. I hope you'll find each other again. I hope when I'm gone, you'll come home, not just to the house, but to one another. Love each other like I loved you. Fiercely. Quietly. Without condition. Marta folded the letter. For a long moment, no one moved. Thank you, Rachel whispered. Daniel took a breath like he was about to speak. But didn't. Jonah looked away, blinking hard, cigarette burning to ash in his fingers. Later that evening, the siblings returned to the old Klein house. It sat at the end of a moss-lined street in South Windmere, its shutters faded, the lawn wild. Eleanor had lived there alone for years after their father's death. Marta had kept it clean, but there was still a thick air of absence in every corner. They stood in the front hallway, bags at their feet, unsure what came next. It had been years since they'd been under the same roof. Years since they'd shared more than a strained phone call or obligatory birthday card. Thunder rumbled again in the distance. The storm wasn't done yet. From the kitchen, Marta called out, I made tea. They followed her in silence. The house creaked as if Eleanor herself was listening. The rain had stopped, but the house still held its breath. Inside the Klein family home, time seemed suspended, as if the walls remembered more than they let on. Jonah wandered the living room like a man trying to recognize a childhood dream. The wallpaper had yellowed, the fireplace was crammed with old picture frames and waxy fake roses. In the far corner sat Eleanor's piano, the lid closed, the keys likely untouched in a decade. He ran his fingers over it, but didn't open it. Not yet. Rachel sat at the kitchen table, wrapping her hands around a chipped mug of chamomile tea. Her eyes were puffy, but her posture straight. That teacher's spine she never lost. She watched Marta silently as the nurse prepared a tray of shortbread cookies with the same precision she had shown brushing Eleanor's hair or adjusting her pillows. Daniel was upstairs. He said he needed to make some calls, but they all knew he wasn't calling anyone. He was avoiding what came next. He always did. The letter had softened something. Not fixed it, but softened. The three siblings had actually eaten dinner together, awkwardly, but together, over soup Marta had made from scratch. They even laughed once, when Jonah tried to sneak a beer from the back of the old fridge and discovered it had expired in 2012. But the house held more than soup and sorrow. After the dishes were cleared, Rachel went to Eleanor's room with Jonah to begin sorting through their mother's things. It was simple, even sparse, a twin bed, a prayer candle, a modest wardrobe. A single bookshelf lined with biographies and poetry. Everything smelled faintly of lavender and Vicks VapoRub. Jonah pulled open the dresser drawers with casual detachment, but Rachel took her time. She folded each blouse, examined each piece of jewelry. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, maybe a connection, maybe a way to delay the inevitable. Funny, right? Jonah said. We lived here for how long, and now it feels like a stranger's house. Rachel didn't reply. She was holding a small music box Eleanor had kept since they were children. It played Moon River, or it used to. Now it creaked and wheezed, the melody broken and halting. She set it gently in the donation pile. Jonah moved to the nightstand, idly opening the drawers. The top drawer was empty but for a bottle of hand lotion and a rosary. The second drawer held some old letters, stamps, and a half-used pad of paper. The third drawer stuck. He jiggled it. Nothing. Knew she had secrets, he muttered. Let me try, Rachel said, wiping her hands. Together, they pulled, and with a hard tug, the drawer slid open. Inside, beneath a faded doily, was a false bottom, barely visible. Jonah reached in and pried it loose. A stack of envelopes emerged, brittle and yellowing at the edges. Their mother's handwriting, unmistakable, filled the front of each one. To Daniel. To Rachel. To Jonah. Dozens of letters. Each one sealed. Jonah picked up the top envelope, dated August 2009. The paper was crinkled, the ink smudged. He opened it. As he read, his breath hitched. Ratch. She came closer, reading over his shoulder. My sweet boy. I miss you. I heard you've been playing in Asheville. I wish I could see you. I wish you'd come home. Not forever. Just for a while. I'll make your favorite. Banana bread. Just come home. Jonah set it down, hands trembling. Rachel opened another. This one was addressed to her. Eleanor had written about Ivy, how she wished she could have seen her ballet recital, how she hoped Rachel was still painting, how she prayed every night for her daughter to call. The handwriting grew more fragile with each letter. Some were nearly illegible. Others had tear stains. They never got these, Rachel whispered. None of us did. Jonah pulled out one of the last ones. The ink was shaky, as though Eleanor could barely hold the pen. I guess I must have done something wrong. But I can't think what. Maybe you're happier without me. If so, I hope that's true. I hope it is. But I still wait, every Sunday, by the phone. Rachel sank onto the bed, the letters spilling across the quilt like autumn leaves. She thought we ignored her, she whispered. All this time, she thought we didn't care. Jonah stared at the wall, jaw clenched. We didn't, Ratch. Not really. No, she said, her voice rising. We didn't call. We didn't visit. But we never got these. She never called either. She never told us she wrote. Something doesn't make sense. It hit them both at the same time. Marta. Jonah stood abruptly and stormed out of the room. Marta was scrubbing the sink when he found her. She turned at the sound of his boots on the tile. You, he said, holding out one of the letters. Did you know about these? She froze. Rachel entered behind him, holding 2 more envelopes in her hands. You told us Eleanor made peace with us being gone, that she forgave us. But she wrote letters. Dozens. Marta's eyes welled up. I didn't lie. Didn't lie. Jonah snapped. She thought we abandoned her. Marta placed the sponge in the sink. Her voice was quiet. She was heartbroken. Every Sunday, she'd wait for your calls. Every Christmas, she'd bake cookies and pretend like she expected company. But it never came. We didn't know, Rachel said. We would have come. We would have. She believed you wouldn't, Marta interrupted. And every time another letter came back unopened, every time she sat by the window all day and nobody came, it broke her more. Rachel shook her head. You sent them back? No, Marta said. I didn't send them at all. The room fell silent. Jonah stepped back like he'd been struck. You intercepted them? He said, voice hollow. Marta's eyes dropped to the floor. She was slipping into depression. She was getting weaker. Every unanswered letter drained her. So I took them. I didn't mail them. You let her think we abandoned her. Rachel's voice cracked. I let her hope, Marta said. You don't understand. My mother died in a hospital bed thinking I hated her. I missed her last call. She died alone. I couldn't let Eleanor feel that pain. I couldn't. She was our mother, Jonah growled. She was mine too, Marta whispered. That stopped them. What? Rachel asked, breath catching. Marta blinked, realizing her words had slipped out. She was, like a mother to me, she corrected quickly. I didn't mean. But the moment was broken. Jonah turned and walked out the front door into the night. Rachel stayed behind, shaking, trying to process the weight of it. All those years of silence, of guilt, of self-recrimination, and it hadn't been the whole truth. Marta had chosen a lie out of love. Rachel couldn't decide if that made it better, or worse. Hours later, Jonah returned. Rain had started again. He was soaked, but didn't speak. He went upstairs, silent. Rachel couldn't sleep. She sat in Eleanor's room, surrounded by the letters, reading them one by one. Eleanor's voice, so absent in life, now filled the room with yearning, regret, memories, and above all, love. At midnight, Rachel lit a candle. She stared at the flame and asked herself the question no one had dared say out loud. Would she rather have known the truth, or lived in the peace of Marta's version? The truth, she suspected, hurt more. In the dim morning light, Marta found one of the letters missing from the kitchen table. She searched quietly, eyes darting, heart racing. Then she saw it, her apartment door, slightly ajar. Her heart pounded. She stepped inside and froze. The couch cushions were tossed. A chair overturned. Her bedroom door stood open. And there, on her bed, was one of Eleanor's letters, pinned to a pillow with a sewing needle. Next to it, a strip of duct tape. Marta's hand flew to her mouth. Was it one of the originals? Or something else entirely? The police came quietly. Not sirens, not shouting, just two officers in plain clothes and rain-speckled jackets, asking calm questions as they took notes in Marta's living room. The tiny apartment smelled of lavender and coffee, a jarring contrast to the broken sense of safety that now hung in the air. Marta sat on her sofa, shoulders hunched, fingers trembling around a chipped mug of tea she couldn't taste. Across from her, Officer Hill, kind eyes, mid-50s, jotted something in a small notebook. And you're sure nothing was taken? Marta nodded. Nothing, I can tell. Hill gestured toward the letter, now sealed in an evidence bag on her coffee table. You recognize the handwriting? Her throat dried. She nodded again. It's Eleanor Klein's, she said. You're certain? I read her grocery lists for 10 years. I'm certain. The officer exchanged a glance with his partner. Marta didn't mention the tape. She didn't have to. It sat there, still slightly curled on the couch cushion, as if waiting to be used again. She felt like she was unraveling, one thread at a time. Across town, Rachel and Jonah sat in a corner booth at a diner near the waterfront. A half-eaten plate of pancakes sat between them. Jonah sipped coffee and looked like he hadn't slept. Rachel stared at her phone, ignoring the third call from Daniel. He knows, Jonah said finally. About Marta. Rachel sighed. Of course he does. He probably had someone snooping the second we told him. He wants to sue, doesn't he? She nodded. Said Marta tampered with correspondence. Claimed we have a case for emotional damage and elder manipulation. And you. I told him about the grace clause in the will. Jonah gave a short laugh. Yeah, well. Knowing Daniel, he'll find a loophole. He always does. Rachel reached into her bag and pulled out one of Eleanor's letters, the one that had arrived just before the holidays 3 years ago. The one none of them had received. She wrote about Ivy, Rachel murmured. About wanting to meet her. She mentioned a drawing Ivy mailed from school, but we never sent one. Marta must have made it up. Jonah watched her carefully. You still want to forgive her? He asked. Rachel didn't answer right away. I don't know, she finally said. But part of me understands. That afternoon, Marta stood on the Klein front porch, holding her purse tightly against her chest. Rachel answered the door and stared at her for a long moment, not saying anything. I shouldn't have come, Marta said quickly. You did, Rachel replied. So come in. The kitchen was quieter than it had ever been. Ivy was at a friend's house. Jonah was out for a walk. Daniel, to no one's surprise, had left early that morning on a flight back to New York. They sat across from each other at the table where Eleanor used to fold laundry. I want to tell you everything, Marta said softly. Rachel folded her arms. Start with the letters. Marta nodded, eyes cast downward. I started taking them when Eleanor was still strong enough to argue with me. She'd sit by the window every week and ask me to walk them down to the mailbox. I did, the first few times. But they came back unopened. Did you tell her that? Rachel asked. I tried. She'd just get quiet. Then she'd make up excuses. They're busy. Jonah's probably on tour. Rachel's got Ivy. She wasn't wrong. Marta smiled sadly. No. But that didn't mean she didn't hurt. She paused, breathing slowly. One day, after a letter came back again, she didn't eat for 3 days. Barely drank. I thought she was giving up. So I lied. I told her that Jonah called, said he was playing a big show in Atlanta. That you sent a postcard from Hilton Head. That Daniel was in court, but said hello. Rachel's mouth tightened. You created a fantasy. I created peace, Marta said, more firmly than before. But it wasn't real. It felt real to her. And that was what mattered. Rachel leaned forward, her voice low and sharp. Did she ever know? Marta hesitated. Once. A month before she died. She asked me why your handwriting looked different on a card. I told her you must have been in a hurry. She didn't press. She knew, Rachel said, voice cracking. She just let it go. They sat in silence. Then Marta pulled something from her purse, a faded photograph, folded at the edges. My mother, she said, setting it down. Rachel looked. The woman had kind eyes, high cheekbones, and the same tired warmth Marta carried in her smile. She raised me alone. I ran away at 17, long story. By the time I tried to come back, she was dying. She called me from the hospital. I didn't answer. I was angry. I thought I had more time. Her voice trembled. She died that night. Alone. With my name on her lips, they said. Rachel closed her eyes. You never forgave yourself. Marta shook her head. No. But Eleanor gave me a second chance. She treated me like family. Sometimes. I think she was my mother, in another life. Rachel looked up, tears in her eyes. I believe that, she said. That night, Jonah returned home and found the two women sitting on the porch, both quiet, wrapped in blankets like they were holding vigil. He sat between them without asking what had been said. The silence was more honest than words. Inside, a lamp glowed in the window. The wind rustled the curtains of Eleanor's old bedroom. There was still a long way to go, but something had shifted. The next day, Rachel checked her voicemail, not her cell, but the landline Eleanor kept in the Klein house. She hadn't even known it was still plugged in until she'd heard it buzz during breakfast. There was one saved message. She played it. Hello, it's me. It's Mom. I just wanted to say I love you. I still love you. I still wait. Rachel froze. The timestamp was October 13th, 2021. She hit replay. I still wait. It wasn't just a phrase. It was a promise. A ghost. A benediction. She played it 5 times before she let herself cry. Meanwhile, in a small studio apartment across town, Marta turned off the lights. She sat in the dark, watching the street lamp flicker outside her window. There was something she hadn't told them. Something she didn't have the heart to say. The letter pinned to her bed, the one the police now held as evidence, hadn't been one of the intercepted ones. It was something else. A letter from Eleanor, addressed to her. "My dearest Marta," it began. "If you're reading this, then maybe one day they found out. Maybe you told them. Maybe you didn't. But I want you to know, I knew. I knew about the letters. I always knew. I also knew you were trying to protect me. You didn't fail me. You saved me. And that's what love is sometimes, isn't it? A quiet kind of mercy." Marta pressed the memory to her chest like a sacrament. She didn't know who had broken into her apartment. She didn't know why someone would unearth the very letter that both damned and absolved her. But she knew one thing for sure. Forgiveness was never simple. And sometimes, the truth had its own agenda. The Klein family attorney, Raymond Shore, had the sort of voice you expected from someone who spent a lifetime navigating death and inheritance. Calm, rehearsed, and always 2 degrees colder than the room. He waited until the siblings were all seated in the paneled conference room in downtown Charleston, then removed his glasses, cleaned them with a monogrammed cloth, and slid a thick folder in front of him. "I appreciate your patience," he began, "and I offer my condolences once again." Daniel barely looked up. Rachel sat stiffly, lips pursed. Jonah, arms folded across his chest, wore sunglasses indoors. Raymond continued. "Your mother's will was updated on April 18th of this year. It's legally binding, witnessed, notarized, and filed correctly. I have copies for each of you. Please read them carefully." They flipped through the pages in near silence, until Jonah gave a low whistle. "The house is worth how much?" "Current market estimate puts it just under $3.4 million, Shore said, adjusting his tie. "Charleston real estate has grown dramatically in recent years, particularly in the Willow Heights district." Daniel exhaled slowly. "And she's leaving it to be sold." Rachel looked at him. "Split 3 ways, Dan. That's still over $1 million each." But Shore wasn't finished. "There is a stipulation," he said. "An amendment to the will. Your mother called it the grace clause." Jonah frowned. "What the hell is that?" Shore tapped a page in the folder. "It's a conditional clause that states, if any of my children engage in public legal action or media exposure regarding my care, my estate, or the individuals involved in either, their portion of the inheritance is forfeited. That forfeited portion will be redistributed equally to the others." Daniel sat bolt upright. "You're joking." "I assure you, I'm not." "Let me get this straight," Daniel snapped. "If I sue Marta, a woman who admittedly intercepted our communication with our dying mother, I lose everything?" Rachel jumped in. "It's what Mom wanted, Daniel. She wanted peace, not vengeance." "It's manipulation," Daniel said. "You're both being played." Shore cleared his throat. "It's legal. Your mother had full capacity when she made these changes. I have the medical clearance from her physician on file. And all 3 of you signed off as contingent beneficiaries when the trust was restructured in April." Daniel rubbed his temple. "She tricked us. She warned us," Rachel said. "She always said forgiveness mattered more than fairness." Jonah snorted. Easy for her to say when she wasn't the one writing letters into the void. Rachel turned to him. "You forgave Marta, didn't you?" "I understood her," Jonah replied. "That's not the same thing." Silence settled. Then Daniel stood, pacing near the window. "She gave us $1 million ultimatum. Forgive and stay quiet, or lose everything. That's not grace, that's coercion." "No," Rachel said softly. "It's a test." Later that afternoon, the 3 of them walked down Broad Street in near silence. Daniel peeled off first, claiming a work call. Rachel didn't ask who it was. She suspected it was a journalist, or worse, a lawyer. Jonah and Rachel ended up at a waterfront bench, watching seagulls dive for breadcrumbs tossed by a group of kids. She knew we'd tear each other apart, Jonah said after a while. No, Rachel replied. She hoped we wouldn't. He glanced sideways. I saw you tear up during the reading. Rachel gave a short, dry laugh. It's easier to cry for money than for someone who already died. That's not true. She turned to him, eyes glistening. Isn't it? Jonah hesitated. Then he pulled a crumpled envelope from his jacket. Lila sent this, he said. Lila, the boy's mother. Rachel took the envelope and pulled out a photo, a grainy print of a dark-haired boy holding a guitar nearly as big as him. On the back, in messy handwriting, it said, "Thanks for sending the check. Leo asked if he could meet your brother someday. He saw him in a magazine." Rachel smiled. "He looks like you." Jonah stared out at the water. "I thought she hated me. I thought Mom would have been ashamed. But now I know she met him once. That she held him. And I didn't even know. She never stopped loving any of us. Then why did she let us drift away?" Rachel shook her head. Maybe because she thought we'd find our way back. Or maybe because she didn't know how to ask anymore. That night, Daniel sat alone in his hotel room, rereading the will with a glass of bourbon in his hand. He wasn't the grieving kind. Never had been. But something about that clause felt like betrayal wrapped in maternal lace. He didn't like being told what to feel. He certainly didn't like being told what he couldn't do. So he picked up his phone and dialed a number. Not a law firm, not a journalist, but a woman named Sarah Green. She'd emailed him the day before, introducing herself as a freelance writer interested in medical ethics and elder law. She hadn't mentioned Marta by name, but he knew. He'd looked up the byline and found a few biting essays on selective caretaking and the ethics of surrogate trust. It had her fingerprints all over it. He called. She picked up after 2 rings. "I was wondering when you'd reach out," she said coolly. "I want to talk," Daniel said. "About Marta. About what she did." Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then, "Meet me at the Indigo Hotel. Rooftop bar. 1 hour. Click." The bar was dim, elegant, and empty. Sarah Green was already there, in a black coat, red lipstick, and a voice like newsprint, sharp and textured. Daniel sat down across from her. "You look like your mother," she said, not unkindly. "You knew Eleanor?" "I knew what Marta told me." Which was, admittedly, not much. He raised an eyebrow. "And what do you want from me?" Sarah sipped her drink. "I want to write the truth. Not just about Marta, about the entire idea of caretakers who take too much power, who edit the past to suit their own peace of mind." Daniel slid her the letter Marta had intercepted. "Start with this." She read it in silence, then looked up. "You planning to sue her?" "Can't," Daniel muttered. "Not without losing my share." Sarah leaned back. "You already lost more than money. You lost time. You lost the right to grieve with clarity. If you want justice, this is your chance." Daniel nodded slowly, but his eyes flicked to her laptop bag. "You really Marta's daughter?" he asked suddenly. Sarah froze. Then smiled. "Didn't think you'd figure it out." He leaned in. "Why the charade? I needed to know what kind of man you were. And what kind is that? The kind who's about to be extorted." Daniel's face went blank. Sarah opened her bag, pulled out a slim folder, and slid it across the table. Inside were documents, wire transfers, offshore accounts, creative accounting. His creative accounting. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. "My mother may be naive about some things," Sarah said, "but she always kept records. You weren't the only one watching. What do you want?" "To leave my mother alone. No lawsuits. No interviews. No articles. Or this goes public, and you'll lose more than an inheritance." She stood. Daniel sat frozen. "You'll get the house," she said, walking away. "Just not your version of the story." Back at the Klein house, Rachel found Jonah on the porch steps, staring at a photo of Eleanor as a young woman. He passed it to her. "She looked happy," Rachel murmured. "Before us." Jonah smirked. Rachel nudged him. "We weren't all bad." "No," he admitted. "Just broken." Rachel sighed. "Daniel's gone quiet." Jonah looked up. "You think he'll sue?" "No," she said. "I think someone beat him to the punch." Inside, the wind rustled the curtains again. The answering machine in the attic blinked once, a light no one noticed. But it was there, waiting. Rachel Klein sat cross-legged on the faded carpet of her mother's bedroom, surrounded by dust motes and silence. The room still smelled faintly of lavender and the off-brand lemon cleaner Marta had always used. Outside, the wind combed through the trees that lined Willow Heights, but inside, time pressed against her like a held breath. She had returned alone, telling Jonah and Daniel she needed space. Daniel hadn't argued, he was still stewing in silence, and Jonah was busy chasing his own ghost in Savannah. So, she came back to the house, to Eleanor's room, with its muted wallpaper and bedside Bible, seeking something she didn't yet have a name for. Her mother's things were sparse, bordering on austere. A few framed photos. A jewelry box with only costume pieces. A rosary. And in the closet, pushed to the back behind an old bathrobe, a shoebox marked Rachel. Rachel hesitated. She pulled it out, setting it gently on the bed. Inside were cassette tapes. 4 of them. Labeled by hand, R, 1995, 1998, 2003, 2008. She blinked. The earliest tape was from the year she turned 18. There was no tape player in sight, but Marta had told her that Eleanor had kept one in the garage, for books on tape and sermons, she'd said. Rachel retrieved it, fingers trembling. She clicked the first tape in. A low hum. Then static. Then her mother's voice, softer, younger. "Hi, Rachel. It's me." "Well, of course it's me. I thought maybe if I said these things out loud, it would be easier." "It's silly, I know. But here we are." Rachel sank to the floor, her back pressed against the wall. "I know we fought a lot this year. You think I'm strict, controlling, and maybe I am. But it's only because I see how bright you are. You're braver than you know. I just don't want the world to chip away at that before you even get a chance." She paused the tape. The date, 1995. The year Rachel had tried to run away. The year she'd first kissed a girl in secret and told no one, not even Jonah. She pressed play again. "I love you," Eleanor said. The words waited. "Even when I don't understand you. Even when you don't tell me things." Rachel felt something crack open inside her. She went to the next tape. 1998. She pressed play. I think I know what happened," Eleanor said quietly. "You didn't come home for 2 days. And when you did, you couldn't even look at me. And I thought, maybe, you were ashamed. Maybe you thought I'd be ashamed of you. But Rachel, if you ever need to tell me something, anything, you can. You're still mine. You'll always be mine." Rachel covered her mouth. She had been 19. And pregnant. The abortion had been done quietly, without fanfare, just 2 counties over. Her best friend drove her. She'd come home sore and silent. She remembered lying to her mother's face about having food poisoning. And yet, Eleanor had known. Not only known, but understood. The silence Rachel had built between them suddenly seemed like a self-made tomb. She fumbled for the last tape, 2008. It was short. No more than a few minutes. "Time moves faster now," Eleanor said. Her voice was thinner. "I'm not sure if you still listen to these. But I leave them anyway. For you. For when I'm gone. I love you. Even in your silence, I love you. I forgive everything. I just hope one day you'll forgive me too. For all the things I never asked, and all the things I never said. Rachel stopped the tape. She wept. Hours later, as dusk spilled into the room, Ivy appeared in the doorway. 16, sharp-eyed, skeptical, she had the posture of someone used to protecting herself. "You okay?" Ivy asked. Rachel wiped her face. "Come here." Ivy stepped into the room, looking wary. Rachel reached out and took her daughter's hand. "I want you to listen to something." They sat together. Rachel rewound the 1998 tape and pressed play. When it ended, Ivy didn't speak right away. Her jaw was tight. "That was Grandma?" she finally asked. "Yes." She knew. "She did. And you never told me." Rachel hesitated. "I didn't know how." "That's a lie," Ivy snapped. "You just didn't want me to see you weak." Rachel felt the slap of the truth in her daughter's voice. "You're right," she said. That threw Ivy off balance. I was ashamed. Not of what I did, but of how I handled it. Of how I ran. From her. From myself. I thought hiding it made me strong. But it made me smaller." Ivy looked away, her eyes glassy. "Did she ever talk to me? Like that?" Rachel swallowed. "No. But I think she wanted to. I think she just didn't know how." They sat in silence again. The dusk deepened. "Did you love her?" Ivy asked suddenly. Rachel nodded. "Even when I didn't want to. Even when I didn't know how. I still do." "She loved you too," Ivy said, surprising them both. "How do you know?" "Because she kept trying," Ivy said. "Even when you didn't write back. She left you these." Rachel pulled her daughter close, her voice breaking. "I want to do better with you." Ivy rested her head on her mother's shoulder. "Then don't leave things unsaid." That night, Rachel took the tapes and made digital copies. She wrote out transcripts. She labeled folders. For herself. For Ivy. For Jonah. Even one for Daniel, though she didn't know if he'd accept it. She walked the old hallways of the Klein house, hearing echoes where walls used to hum with life. Her bare feet brushed against familiar wood, and she stopped at the doorway of her mother's sewing room. The room was mostly empty now, but the old ironing board was still there, and pinned to the wall was a quote Rachel hadn't noticed before. It was handwritten, in fading marker. "Children begin by loving their parents. As they grow older they judge them. Sometimes, they forgive them." Oscar Wilde. Rachel stared at it for a long time. Then she went downstairs and made tea. The next morning, she received a text from Jonah. "Daniel's back. Says he wants to talk. In person." Rachel stared at the message, unsure whether to laugh or brace for impact. Then another ping came in, from Ivy. "I think you should go. And bring the tapes." By noon, she was back in town, waiting at the cafe Jonah picked, an old bookstore turned bistro with threadbare chairs and too many muffins. Daniel arrived late. Always did. He looked tired. But not defensive. Jonah gave a nod that passed for hello. Rachel handed Daniel a small flash drive. He raised an eyebrow. "Tapes Mom left me," she said. "I think you should hear them." "I don't need." "Just listen," Rachel interrupted. "You don't have to believe me. But believe her." Daniel took the drive, pocketed it. "Why now?" "Because we're running out of moments to get this right," she said. "And because Ivy knows. She knows everything now. And I don't want her to inherit our silence." Daniel looked genuinely startled. "You told her." "She heard it herself. She cried. Then she forgave me. Faster than I forgave Mom." Jonah leaned forward. "We all got something from her. Even if we didn't know it." Daniel's jaw clenched. "I got distance. You got armor," Rachel said. "And maybe it's time to take it off." That night, Rachel returned to the Klein house alone one last time. She walked out to the garden where Eleanor used to sit with her tea, watching the morning bloom. There, on the old wooden bench, was something she hadn't noticed before. Etched into the wood by hand, old and worn, were the words, "I still wait." She sat down beside them, a daughter no longer running. The text came at 2:14 a.m. From Jonah. In Savannah. Not okay. Don't follow. By 7 a.m., Rachel was packing a small overnight bag and printing out driving directions. Daniel, bleary-eyed and unspeaking, sat at the breakfast counter nursing bitter coffee. Ivy had gone back to Charlotte with Rachel's friend for the weekend. "You're seriously going after him?" Daniel asked without looking up. "He's our brother. He's a grown man who drinks like a kid and disappears like a ghost." Rachel zipped her bag. "And maybe that ghost needs someone to find him for once." Daniel said nothing. His silence was permission enough. Savannah, Georgia. The smell of river water and magnolia hung thick in the air as Rachel stepped out of her car. Savannah pulsed with humid life. Cobblestone alleys, balconies draped in ivy, old ghosts tucked into each corner. It didn't take long to find the bar. The Devil's Violin. A dive tucked between an antique shop and a failed soul food cafe. A man on a stool at the entrance looked up as she approached. "You Rachel?" he asked, squinting through nicotine haze. "Yes." "He's inside. But you're gonna wanna sit first." She didn't sit. She walked straight in. Jonah was on stage, guitar in hand, barefoot. His hair had grown longer, shaggier. He wore a threadbare shirt, sleeves rolled high to show inked forearms. His voice rasped through a verse of Leonard Cohen's Bird on the Wire, and for a moment, Rachel forgot why she was angry. When the song ended, he looked up and froze. She stared back. "Rachel, get off the damn stage." They sat outside, plastic cups of sweet tea sweating in their hands. The courtyard behind the bar was quiet, overgrown, and oddly serene. "I didn't mean for you to come," Jonah said. "Well, here I am." He looked tired, but not defensive. "I screwed everything up again, didn't I?" Rachel took a sip. "Depends what you mean by everything." Jonah winced. "Okay, fair. Start talking." He reached into his guitar case and pulled out a folded photo. It was worn, almost crumbling at the edges. A boy, maybe 7, grinning, eyes wide, a missing tooth front and center. Rachel's hand trembled as she took the photo. "Who is this?" "My son," Jonah said quietly. She stared at him. "His name's Mason. His mom's Lila. I met her 9 years ago in Asheville. We were together, on and off. Mostly off. And you never told us?" "What was I gonna say?" he snapped. "That the screw-up of the family had a kid out of wedlock with a waitress in a town he couldn't afford to live in?" "Yes," Rachel said, voice steady. "That's exactly what you should have said." Jonah slumped. "I didn't want Mason to carry my shame." "You think he doesn't already know something's missing?" "He knows me. We talk. I send money." "That's not knowing, Jonah. That's just surviving." He fell silent. Rachel softened. "Does Mom know?" That question shifted something in his posture. "She met him," Jonah said. "Once. Lila told me later. She came by the diner one afternoon and asked to hold him." Rachel blinked. "Wait, Mom found you." "She said she was just passing through, but you know Mom. She made it sound like fate." Lila said she held Mason for maybe 5 minutes. Didn't say much. Just cried a little. Said he looked like me. Then left. Rachel's breath hitched. So, she knew. She never said a word. She never wanted me to feel ashamed. She just wanted to see her grandson. Rachel pressed a hand to her mouth. Overcome. She forgave us all before we even asked. Jonah's voice cracked. And I never gave her a chance to say it out loud. They visited Lila's house that afternoon. A modest home outside of town, where wind chimes danced on the porch and a worn trampoline sagged in the backyard. Lila opened the door, blinking in surprise. "Jonah," she said, smiling sadly. "Thought I'd see you at Christmas." "This is my sister," he said. Rachel extended a hand. "Nice to meet you." Finally, Lila ushered them in. Inside, it was warm and lived in, full of Mason's art and half-finished puzzles. "Where is he?" Jonah asked. "At a sleepover," Lila replied, then lowered her voice. "But he talks about you like you're a superhero." Jonah looked down, shame coloring his features. Lila turned to Rachel. "He's a good kid. And your mom? She was kind. I didn't even know who she was at first. She just wanted to meet him." Rachel sat at the kitchen table. "She must have planned that trip. Tracked you down." "She brought a gift," Lila said. "A children's book, The Giving Tree. Said it was Jonah's favorite." Rachel felt the breath leave her body. "She gave that book to all of us," she whispered. Lila reached into a drawer and pulled out the old copy. Inside the front cover was a note in Eleanor's handwriting. "To Mason, a boy worth growing old for. Love, Grandma E." Rachel cried openly now, tears dripping onto the table. "She gave what she could," Lila said gently, "even when she had nothing left." That night, Jonah played another set at the bar. Rachel stayed to listen. Halfway through, he stopped mid-song. "This one's for someone I didn't know I needed," he said into the mic, "and for someone I didn't thank in time." Then he played Bridge Over Troubled Water. Rachel watched, heart in her throat, as the song carried through the bar like a bomb. The next morning, they drove back to Charleston together. Jonah talked about Lila, about Mason, about the odd hope that maybe it wasn't too late to do something different. Rachel listened and forgave. "You know," he said as they crossed into South Carolina, "Mom always said we were 3 legs of a stool. Take one away, and it all tips." Rachel smiled through tears. "Maybe we're still tipping. But we're still standing." At the Klein house, Daniel was waiting. Jonah held out the photo of Mason. "This is your nephew," he said. Daniel didn't speak. He took the photo, stared at it for a long time, and walked away. Baby steps, Rachel thought. That night, alone in the garden, Jonah lit a candle and placed it on the bench. "Thanks for not giving up on me," he whispered. And somewhere in the hush of wind and memory, he almost swore he heard her say, "I never did." Charleston's fall sunlight crept through the stained glass windows of Eleanor Klein's now silent house. The antique rugs smelled of lavender and dust. Daniel sat alone in the study, back straight, tie still knotted though the hour had long passed decency. The other two were out, Rachel at a school interview, Jonah visiting Mason in Savannah. Daniel stared at his mother's old desk. Ornate, walnut, and locked, until he found the tiny brass key in her jewelry box. Inside were receipts, loose photos, and one yellowed folder labeled simply, "Legal." He flipped it open. Inside, bank statements, a will signed 6 months before her death, and a letter addressed to her lawyer. "If Daniel threatens litigation, remind him what silence costs." His name underlined twice. Daniel let the letter drop. He poured himself a neat scotch, the kind Mom never kept, but he did, and dialed a number he'd saved for years but never used. "South Carolina Dispatch." The voice on the other end crackled. "This is Sarah." He hesitated. "I have a story." "Go on." "I have proof that a nurse at Willow Heights tampered with a dying woman's communications, kept letters from her children, altered her perception of reality, probably impacted her estate planning. The woman was Eleanor Klein. The nurse's name is Marta Diaz." A pause. Then, "Can you prove it?" "I have the letters. Originals and copies. Statements. Witnesses. I'll give you exclusive rights." "Why now?" He glanced at the will again. "Let's just say I believe in truth." "Meet me tomorrow," she said. "Indigo Roost Cafe, 11 a.m. Ask for Lisa. She hung up. Daniel smirked. For the first time in weeks, the ground beneath him felt firm. He'd expose Marta, protect the family legacy, and yes, maybe break the will's grace clause, but only if the others didn't find out. He didn't yet know he'd just lit the match on his own life. Indigo Roost Cafe was tucked into a cobbled alley behind a bookstore, the kind of place that served lavender lattes and had quotes painted on the ceiling. Daniel ordered black coffee and sat at a table by the window. At 11:03, a woman walked in. Mid-30s. Sharp bob haircut. Glasses with thin gold rims. She approached with a neutral smile. Lisa? He asked. She's Saturday, Sarah, actually. Lisa's just a signal word. Daniel blinked. Wait. Sarah what? Sarah Diaz, she said. Marta's daughter. His world lurched sideways. I changed my last name in college, she added calmly. Didn't want people Googling my mother's history, or mine. Daniel stood, furious. This is entrapment. She held up a hand. Sit down, Mr. Klein, please. You're going to want to hear what I have to say. He sat. Sarah leaned in. I recorded our call. Saved the voicemail, too. What you attempted could be considered defamation, if not attempted fraud, especially if you were planning to profit off the will's breach. But I'm not interested in suing you. He narrowed his eyes. Then what do you want? I want you to stop. Leave my mother alone. Let your mother rest. And most of all, keep your secrets where they belong. Daniel's hands curled into fists. What secrets? Sarah opened a manila folder. Inside, printouts, wire records, even a scanned check, all tied to Daniel. Offshore accounts, shell donations, falsified billings to clients through a firm called Klein Barton Legal Trust. He went cold. You don't understand the context. I understand enough, she said. Do you really want your siblings, or the IRS, to find out that you've been laundering bonuses through a charity foundation? Or that Eleanor's health fund paid for part of your Upper West Side apartment? His face twisted. That apartment was gifted? No. Allocated. There's a difference. Daniel stood again. What do you want from me? Sarah smiled. Nothing. I'm not going to publish anything. Not yet. But if I see a single headline, a single whisper about Marta from you, this becomes public. Everything. His eyes were full of ice. You're bluffing. I'm not, she said. And I'm not cruel. Just tired of watching people weaponize the truth to hide their own. He stormed out, heart pounding so loud it drowned out the cafe's jazz soundtrack. That night, back at the house, he sat at Eleanor's desk, running his fingers over the old wooden grain. He pulled out the last letter she'd ever written him, the one Rachel had found behind the mirror. He hadn't read it yet. Now he did. Dear Danny, I know you're busy. I know you carry more weight than you should. You always have. Even as a boy, you were the protector. But love doesn't come with a resume. I don't want your status. I don't want your success. I want you to be a brother, a son, a man who believes he is worthy, not because he built an empire, but because he still knows how to hold a hand. You don't have to earn love, Danny. You just have to let it in. Love. Mom. Daniel read the letter 5 times. Each word dug deeper. Each sentence cracked the armor he'd spent decades building. He folded it neatly and put it in his inside jacket pocket, like a charm. Or a confession. Later that night, Jonah returned. He looked cleaner, lighter. Mason's photo now framed in his backpack. Everything okay? He asked. Daniel nodded too quickly. Fine. Rachel said you went to see a journalist. Daniel stiffened. It's handled. You didn't do anything stupid, did you? No, Daniel said, then paused. Not today. Jonah stared at him. You know, It's okay to admit you're in over your head. I'm not, Daniel snapped, then softened. But thank you. They sat in silence for a long moment, brothers on opposite sides of a crumbling legacy. At midnight, Daniel deleted Sarah's number from his phone. He stood in front of the mirror, holding Eleanor's letter. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so damn sorry. And though no one heard it but the shadows in the house, the words rang true. For the first time in years, Daniel slept through the night. The Klein family house sat on a corner lot in Charleston's old village, where trees grew heavy with Spanish moss and shutters creaked like old men remembering. Now empty, the house exhaled grief, filling every room with echoes of lives half-lived and things left unsaid. Rachel was the first to arrive that morning, coffee in hand and Ivy trailing silently behind her. Jonah came next, with Mason asleep in a carrier strapped to his chest. Daniel, as always, arrived last, wearing a crisp button-down that tried too hard to pretend nothing had changed. The siblings stood in the foyer, surrounded by stacked boxes and plastic bins. We should start upstairs, Rachel said. No, Daniel replied. The attic. Why? Asked Jonah, already weary. Daniel's voice was quiet. Because that's where Mom kept the things she didn't want anyone to find. They climbed the narrow stairs, one by one, ducking beneath low beams. The attic hadn't been opened in years. Dust motes danced in the slanting light from the single round window. Old trunks, yellowed newspapers, and a cracked cedar chest sat in the middle like a time capsule. Ivy stayed back, sensing the weight of it all. Jonah pried open the cedar chest. Inside were quilts, framed photos, a set of wedding china, and a plastic bag marked simply, phone room. Inside the bag was a beige cordless answering machine, the kind with little red lights and tape reels. Didn't even know people kept these anymore, Jonah said, blowing off dust. Rachel picked it up, squinting at the back. It still has the cassette. Daniel crossed his arms. Plug it in. They stared at him. He didn't flinch. She recorded something. Otherwise, why save it? They brought the machine downstairs and plugged it into the kitchen wall. The red light blinked once. Just once. Rachel pressed play. The machine clicked. Static. Then, hello. Danny. Jonah. Rachel. It's Mom. Her voice was older than they remembered. Fragile. Faint. I know you may not want to hear from me, but I want you to know, I still love you. I'm still waiting. That's all. Okay. Goodbye. The tape clicked off. Silence followed. Thick. Unbreathable. Ivy's eyes welled. Rachel was already crying. Jonah lowered his head and walked to the window, unable to face anyone. Daniel, usually the one who steeled himself, crumbled. He slid down the kitchen wall until he sat on the floor, head bowed. She called, he whispered. She actually called. She never stopped, Rachel said. We just didn't hear her. Later that afternoon, Marta arrived unannounced, summoned by no one but pulled by something she couldn't name. She held a small brown bag in her hand. I heard you found the answering machine, she said softly. Rachel nodded, wiping her face. You ever hear that message? Marta shook her head. She left it after I'd gone home. She didn't tell me. Jonah stepped forward. You should listen to it. Marta hesitated, then nodded. Rachel pressed play. When Eleanor's voice spoke again, Marta's hands trembled. She covered her mouth as the words washed over her. I still love you. I'm still waiting. The tape ended. Marta turned away, tears running down her face. She never asked me to lie, she whispered. I told myself I was protecting her. But she never asked. That night, Marta went home and called her daughter. Sarah didn't answer. Marta left a voicemail. I know you're angry. You should be. But I'm ready now. I'm ready to tell you everything. No more silence. The next morning, Sarah showed up at Marta's door. They sat at the tiny kitchen table, two women who had lost each other not once, but over and over again. "She trusted me," Marta said. "Eleanor. She never questioned what I gave or withheld. But I made myself the author of her story." Sarah listened. "I thought I was sparing her pain. But maybe I was just afraid of watching someone else be abandoned. Like I was." Sarah's voice was flat. "You think I don't know that pain? You think I didn't wonder why my own mother chose other people's mothers to comfort?" Marta looked up, ashamed. "I never stopped loving you. You just stopped showing it." Sarah rose and walked toward the door, but paused. "She didn't need you to be perfect," she said. "Just present. Like I did." She left without slamming the door. It was the smallest beginning. Back at the Klein house, Rachel was folding clothes in Eleanor's bedroom when Ivy appeared in the doorway. "Mom," she said quietly. "Can we talk?" Rachel set down the sweater in her hand. "Of course. I've been thinking about that tape. And about the one from before. The one where Grandma talked about your abortion." Rachel's heart jumped, but she nodded. "Okay." "She didn't hate you," Ivy said. "She understood." "She did," Rachel said softly. "But I didn't believe she would. Not then. I wish I'd known her better." Rachel smiled sadly. "I think we're just starting to know her now." Ivy sat beside her. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Rachel sighed. "Because I didn't want you to think I was ashamed of you. And I didn't want you to carry a story that wasn't yours to hold." "But I'm part of it," Ivy said. "And I want to understand." Rachel pulled her daughter close. "Then let's talk. For real this time." Downstairs, Jonah stood in the living room, staring at the grand piano Eleanor had once played every Sunday. His hand drifted to the keys, pressing one note at a time. "Do you remember when she taught us Chopin?" he asked Daniel, who was watching from the hall. "You hated it," Daniel said. Jonah smiled faintly. "I was 8. I hated everything." A pause. Then Jonah asked, "Do you think she was happy?" Daniel didn't answer right away. "I think she had moments," he said at last. "And I think those moments were probably enough. Because she loved us. Even when we weren't easy to love." Jonah nodded, eyes glossy. "We never said goodbye." Daniel looked at the answering machine. "She did." That evening, as the sun began to slip behind the oaks, the siblings gathered in the garden for one final night. They brought candles and photos, old letters and Eleanor's favorite blanket. Ivy lit a candle and handed it to Rachel. "For Grandma," she said. Rachel smiled, kissed her daughter's forehead, and whispered, "For Grandma." Marta arrived just before dusk, standing at the gate until Rachel waved her in. No one protested. They sat in a circle. Marta brought a small tape recorder of her own. "I want you to hear something," she said. "Something I read to her every week. I thought maybe it would help." She pressed play. It was The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. Her voice was warm, quiet, full of love. As the story unfolded, the group sat motionless, listening not just to the tale, but to the presence it carried. When it ended, no one spoke for a long time. Then Ivy whispered, "She gave everything." Jonah said, "She didn't ask for anything back." Daniel murmured, "But we still could have given more." Marta looked down at her hands. "She forgave you. Long before the letters." Daniel finally looked her in the eye. "We forgive you too." Marta let out a shuddering breath, part sorrow, part relief. The wind passed softly through the garden. And for just a moment, it felt like Eleanor was still there. The dining room was quiet, but not peaceful. The large oak table where Eleanor Klein once hosted Thanksgivings and birthdays now held only mismatched plates, reheated food, and the weight of generations of silence. Rachel had cooked, though her hands had shaken. Jonah had brought wine, cheap and half-finished. Daniel had brought nothing, but he had come, and that was something. The chandelier flickered above them, casting fractured light. "I didn't think we'd ever do this again," Rachel said, forcing a smile. "Yeah, well," Jonah muttered, "nothing says family reunion like death and contested morality." Daniel's fork scraped his plate. Ivy sat beside her mother, quiet but alert. Across the table, Mason slept in a portable crib, the faint sound of his breath the only steady rhythm in the room. "Let's just eat," Daniel said. "We don't have to dig everything up again." Rachel glanced at him. "We can't move forward if we don't." "There's no forward. There's just this. Dust and regret and too many letters." Jonah poured more wine. "And that lovely little clause in the will reminding us that forgiveness pays dividends." Daniel glared. "Are you accusing me of—" "I'm accusing all of us," Jonah interrupted. "We showed up too late and left too soon. Mom gave everything, and we gave her silence." The room tensed. Ivy looked at her mother, uncertain. "I want to talk about Marta," Rachel said quietly. Daniel pushed his plate aside. "Of course you do. The holy nurse. Patron saint of deception." "She was wrong," Rachel admitted. "But she believed she was protecting Mom." Jonah leaned forward. "She lied, Rachel." "Yes, she did." Rachel's voice cracked. "But she also bathed Mom, fed her, read to her, held her hand at the end. She didn't steal from her. She didn't exploit her. She just tried to keep her heart from breaking." Daniel scoffed. "And failed." "Maybe," Jonah said, "but can you honestly say we did any better?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "I didn't rewrite reality." Rachel's tone hardened. "No, you just ignored it." The silence exploded into chaos. "Don't come at me like I was the only one who left," Daniel shouted. "You ran off and got pregnant and never told anyone." "You think I ran? I was terrified. I was 19, alone, and I thought Mom would hate me." "She wouldn't have," Jonah muttered. "You know that now." Rachel's voice trembled. "But I didn't then." Daniel threw up his hands. "You all had your reasons. We all did. But don't paint her like a saint. She hurt us too." Jonah stood. "So now it's her fault?" Daniel stood too. "She made me feel like nothing I did was ever enough. That I had to be perfect. That I had to carry everything. When Dad died, I became the man of the house, and she expected me to fix it all." Rachel reached for him. "Danny." "No." His voice cracked. "I worked myself raw trying to make something of myself, thinking if I just succeeded enough, she'd say she was proud of me." Tears filled his eyes, sharp and unrelenting. "She never did." The room held its breath. Rachel got up and walked to the sideboard, pulling out a manila envelope. "She wrote to you," she said softly. "I found this in her Bible." She labeled it, "For Danny. When he's ready." Daniel took the envelope like it might shatter in his hands. His fingers trembled as he opened it. Inside was a letter, her handwriting delicate but clear. "My sweet Danny. You were always the one who carried too much. You were 8 years old and trying to be a father to your siblings. I should have told you then. You didn't have to be. You didn't have to earn love, not mine, not anyone's. I am proud of you. I always was. Even when I didn't say it out loud. Especially then. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you. Let love in, Danny. It's been waiting. Always. Mom." He read the letter twice, then folded it slowly and set it down. Jonah sat again, exhausted. Rachel poured herself a glass of water with shaky hands. "I kept waiting for the moment when forgiveness would feel clean," she said. "But it's not. It's messy. It hurts. And it doesn't make everything okay." "But it's a start," Jonah said. Daniel looked at them both. You really believe that? Rachel nodded. I have to. I want to, Daniel whispered. The wind rattled the window panes. Ivy broke the silence. I think Grandma forgave all of you long ago. But you still need to forgive yourselves. No one replied, but her words echoed like a hymn. Later that night, after the table had been cleared and the house had gone quiet, Daniel stood in the garden alone. He held the letter in his hand, worn now from reading it again and again. Marta approached softly. I wasn't going to say anything, she said. But I needed to see you. Daniel looked at her, not with rage, but with something close to sorrow. I hated you, he said plainly, for what you did. I know. But I hated myself more. For not being there. For letting her think I didn't care. Marta stepped closer. She knew, Daniel. That's what you need to believe. She always knew. He looked at the sky, the stars just beginning to peek through. She forgave you, he said finally. Marta swallowed. I don't know if I deserve it. None of us do, Daniel replied. That's the point. Inside, Rachel lay awake in Eleanor's old room, Ivy curled beside her. Mom. Yes, baby. Do you think she's at peace now? Rachel stared at the ceiling. I think she was waiting for this. For us. To talk. To be together. To tell the truth, finally. Ivy held her mother's hand. Then maybe she's not really gone. Rachel squeezed her daughter's fingers. Not if we remember. In the guest room, Jonah strummed a quiet lullaby on his guitar while Mason slept beside him. The boy stirred, then stilled. Jonah whispered, She held you once, you know. Before I even told anyone you existed. She held you and smiled like she'd been waiting her whole life. He played a few more soft chords, then stopped and just sat in silence, letting the echo of the music fill the space. Daniel stayed in the garden for a long time. Then he walked back inside, letter in hand, and laid it gently in the center of the dining table. Not to discard it, but to share it. Because sometimes love, once unspoken, needs to be heard again and again before it settles into the bones. The house emptied slowly, like the exhale of a long-held breath. Each room gave back its ghosts as Rachel, Jonah, and Daniel packed boxes in silence. The light in Eleanor Klein's once vibrant Charleston home had shifted, not vanished, just softened, settling into the floorboards and corners, into the spaces between words once left unsaid. The estate sale had gone quicker than expected. Buyers came in with eager eyes and checkbooks. A young couple with a toddler bought the house. They loved the garden. They promised to keep the porch swing Eleanor never got around to replacing. On the last morning, Rachel stood in the living room, tracing the wood grain of the fireplace mantel where family photos once sat. Jonah leaned against the entryway, his arms crossed, guitar slung over his back. Daniel stood by the door, suitcase in hand. Rachel cleared her throat. Feels wrong to say goodbye here. Daniel glanced at her. Maybe because it's not a goodbye. Jonah gave a crooked smile. More like a messy, see you later. No one laughed, but no one cried either. That, in itself, was progress. Just as they were about to leave, Rachel remembered the envelopes. She walked to the kitchen and opened the cabinet above the fridge, the one Eleanor had always kept locked. She'd found the key in Eleanor's jewelry box 3 nights ago but hadn't opened it until now. Inside were 3 plain envelopes, each marked with a name: Rachel, Jonah, Daniel. Rachel handed them out silently. Ivy stood nearby, holding Mason in her arms as Jonah read his name on the envelope, brow furrowed. Each sibling opened theirs with careful hands, the way one might open a sacred relic. Inside was a single folded sheet and a smaller card, a copy of a handwritten poem in Eleanor's elegant script. The poem was familiar. They had heard her quote it in fragments over the years, never knowing its origin. Love doesn't keep score. It just waits. It waits in empty chairs, in locked doors, in voicemail boxes filled but never emptied. It waits in rooms cleaned and calendars crossed out. In the silence between birthdays. And the pauses before someone dares to say, I miss you. Love doesn't keep score. It doesn't hold receipts. It doesn't itemize apologies. It just waits. Daniel folded his copy carefully, pressing the edges flat as if to preserve every syllable. Jonah tucked his inside his guitar case. Rachel held hers against her chest like something breakable. I think she wrote this after she stopped writing letters, Rachel said. Maybe it's the last thing she ever wrote, Jonah added. Daniel nodded, subdued. Maybe it's the first thing she meant. A week later, Marta Klein packed her life into a single van. She didn't tell anyone where she was going, not even Sarah. She left the nursing home quietly, handing in her badge, leaving behind the only place that had tethered her for the last decade. She left one thing on her desk, a worn copy of The Giving Tree, Eleanor's name scrawled on the inside cover. Sarah showed up at the house before Marta left. I'm not here to fix anything, Sarah said, arms crossed, sunglasses still on despite the cloudy day. I wouldn't expect you to. Sarah looked around the small, cluttered apartment. So you're running? No, Marta said softly. I'm finishing. Sarah took off her sunglasses. You did the wrong thing. I know. But, you didn't do it for the wrong reasons. That caught Marta off guard. You think so? Sarah shrugged. I think you broke something. But sometimes, what's broken lets the light in. For the first time in days, Marta smiled. Will I see you again? She asked. Sarah hesitated. I'm not ready to forgive you. But maybe someday. I don't want to forget you, either. Marta walked over and pressed something into her daughter's hand, a photo of them, taken when Sarah was a baby. Her young face lit up in her mother's arms. I waited for you, Marta said. I know. They didn't hug. They didn't cry. But something softened in the space between them. Rachel stayed in Charleston. She took a position at a local charter school and rented a small cottage 10 minutes from Eleanor's grave. She and Ivy visited often, laying fresh flowers and reading poetry aloud. One afternoon, Ivy came home from school and found her mother sitting at the kitchen table, sorting through a box of old cassette tapes. What are those? Voicemails, Rachel said. From when phones still plugged into the wall. Ivy tilted her head. What's on them? Life, Rachel answered, smiling. Little pieces of it. They played one together, a message from Eleanor to her grandchildren, long before Mason and Ivy were even born. To whoever listens to this one day, I hope you know you come from stubborn, broken, beautiful people. I hope you laugh louder than we did. And I hope you never wait too long to say what matters. Jonah, for the first time in years, rented an apartment. A real one. In Savannah, near the water. He enrolled Mason in preschool. He started playing at local venues again, not for money, but for connection. He told stories between songs now. About a woman named Eleanor who'd once sat in a dusty chair and told her son she forgave him just for being human. Sometimes, when Mason couldn't sleep, Jonah would tell him a story Eleanor had once told him, about a tree that loved a boy, and how love meant giving until you were a stump, and still loving even then. Daniel returned to Manhattan. But his penthouse felt colder than it had before. One evening, he received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was an old cassette tape. He borrowed a player from a colleague and sat in his office after hours, placing the tape inside with trembling hands. Eleanor's voice spilled into the room. Hi, Daniel. It's me. I wanted to say I saw your face in the newspaper last week. You looked tired. But I know that face. That's your father's face when he was trying too hard and pretending it didn't hurt. You don't have to do it alone. Even if we're far apart. Even if you're angry. I love you, Danny. I love you enough to wait. I always will. Daniel lowered his head into his hands and let himself cry. Not a clean, cathartic sob, but a messy, middle-of-the-night kind of unraveling. He didn't call his siblings right away. But he saved the tape. He played it again. And again. Months later, in the garden of Willow Heights nursing home, a young nurse read The Giving Tree aloud to an elderly woman who no longer remembered her own daughter's name. The nurse didn't know the full story of the book's legacy, only that it had belonged to a resident named Eleanor Klein, who'd once insisted on reading it aloud every Thursday. She read the final lines slowly. And the tree was happy. The old woman smiled. Somewhere in the wind, it felt like Eleanor smiled too.